It's 2004. Blockbuster is at the height of popularity, with over 9,000 rental locations globally. The video rental chain is synonymous with home entertainment. Whatever you want. Movies, TV shows, music, video games. If you want it at home, you go to Blockbuster. And in the rearview mirror, some upstarts try to sell a failing DVD by mail rental company for the gross over evaluation of $50 million. They call themselves innovative. Fast forward to 2010, Blockbuster files for bankruptcy, and Netflix, with its subscription-based online video streaming service, is king of home video. How did this come to be? How did a giant like Blockbuster go from on top of the world to the edge of irrelevancy? What does this say about how we consume and produce content? Does this mean anything for the future?
The invention of television has made it possible for us to communicate through a combination of sights and sounds. Modern means of communication have overcome the ancient barriers of time and distance.
Away in full spectrum color.
Taking an idea that no one thinks will work and somehow, inexplicably, turning it into a company which has changed the way we watch television.
Why don't you buy it? You know, all our tapes are for sale.
Netflix has found success in its business by renting DVDs to a growing group of subscribers.
Unless you've been living on a rock the past few years, it's very likely you use software as a service.
Netflix's streaming service has now surpassed the company's DVD by mail service, and that success could be an indication of things to come. Online access is now becoming a household staple, with various gadgets making it easier to connect high-definition TVs to the web.
You can just see how Netflix has left the rest for dust.
We do see increasing numbers of subscription models across all different media formats.
Mr. Hastings, what is Netflix and what do you do?
Things exist physically, so it made sense that the best way to consume something was to own it. You had to have a book to read it, have a movie ticket, DVD or VHS to watch it, have a CD, cassette, or vinyl record to listen to it. Of course, you could rent or borrow, like from a library, but you still physically had to have it for you to enjoy it. And for a time, software was no different. You bought a physical copy and installed it on your computer. This was due to the limitations of the time. It was far more practical to purchase a physical copy than it was to download it. You buy it once, you own that copy forever. And this idea of ownership equals usage was a mainstay because, well, that's how it was always done. But eventually, advancements in internet infrastructure made it possible to host software online. This made it so that the service was always up to date and accessible from any internet-capable device. But this relinquished control and ownership from the user. At this point, it didn't make sense for the seller to give all this access for a one-time payment. And it also didn't make sense for consumers to pay every time they wanted to use the service. And so, digital ownership became an idea of the past. Businesses began adopting subscription-based models to sustain their services. And today, it's not just software. This model is being extended to books, music, videos, and other forms of media and services. Consumers now prefer paying for access to content instead of ownership.
I'm a Photoshop user for over 20 years, okay, and I like my Photoshop on my machine. What's the difference in the user experience using it on the cloud in a subscription model as opposed to having it on my hard drive?
Really none. You still do have it on your hard drive. We simply install the software via the internet connection. It's not like you're in a web browser and you're clicking around in menus and things in there. It's still all the same software.
Okay.
There was a study. It was in one of the magazines said 76% of people were going to stay with CS6, the latest box release, the last box release. That was right as this cloud idea came out. What have you seen in actuality?
Kind of the opposite.
I kind of figured.
Yeah, it's been tremendously successful.
I think there's an analogy here to iTunes.
Let's start with the subscription-based business model. Before going into detail about how subscriber-based content came to be, it's important to first understand what subscriber-based content is and how the business model operates. HBO is a subscription service. A newspaper or monthly magazine is also a subscription service. So that leads us to SaaS, which stands for Software as a Service. According to TechRadar, it's a cloud-based service where instead of downloading software to your desktop PC to run and update, you instead access an application via an internet browser. Often, the software is licensed on a subscription basis. And then we have Video on Demand, or VOD for short, which allows viewers to watch a video whenever they choose to. The S in SVOD stands for subscription, meaning subscription-based video on demand. YouTube, Vimeo, and Dailymotion are VOD platforms. Hulu, Disney+, and Netflix are SVODs, and of course, as a platform, also a SaaS. Finally, we have OTT media services. OTT is short for over the top, and this just means media, like audio, video, or chat messaging delivered over the internet.
The Netflix name is everywhere, built into all kinds of devices, as Hastings showed me the other day.
Netflix is getting used on televisions and Blu-ray players so much that the manufacturers, like Sony and others, want to put a red button right on the remote control. So you just click and up comes the Netflix application.
So, how did we get here? Let's take a look at some of the previous business practices and the factors that led to the rise of subscription-based models. Going back to the 20th century, the presiding consumer economic model was hit culture. It was defined by physical entertainment, brick-and-mortar video, music stores, movie theaters, concert venues, radio stations, broadcast, and cable channels. The primary revenue sources for this model were sales and advertisements. This means that the more products and services that are sold, and the more people who listen to and watch advertisements, leads to increased revenue. However, due to its physical nature, hit culture was limited by time and space. You can only have so many hours in a day to schedule TV shows or radio plays, only so much space in a brick-and-mortar shop to store DVDs and CD albums, and venues could only hold so many people. To work around these limitations and optimize sales, hit culture had to appeal to as broad of a range of interests and preferences as possible. This artificially and forcefully narrowed consumer choices. Brick-and-mortar also presented significant challenges in an ever-changing world. As internet technology kept getting more advanced, with high-speed internet connections and the anonymity of peer-to-peer networks, anybody and everybody with a basic internet service was able to obtain counterfeit versions of digital products. Piracy was not only free, but very easy to do, much easier than buying at the local store. One such industry that was affected was music. Because music has such high production value and little to no reproduction costs, it became heavily pirated and record sales plummeted significantly.
Blockbuster announced Wednesday voluntary bankruptcy protection could be in the offing. A loss of nearly $435 million in the fourth quarter worsened an already bleak financial picture.
So how does Netflix fit into all this? Netflix had its start in 1998, and their direct competitor was Blockbuster, a brick-and-mortar giant. Though video streaming wasn't always a service they offered, they were always a web-based company. Still, even at the very beginning, they were innovating around the idea of what home entertainment should be by presenting a unique service offer. Users were able to register to an online database and rent DVD titles to be shipped directly to their homes. This was at a time when the DVD too was a new medium. They also championed consumer-centric practices, such as no late fees, a no-hassle policy towards lost or damaged discs, and a no-hassle cancellation policy. During this period as a DVD rental company, Netflix had another breakthrough in innovation, the Netflix algorithm. By prompting the user to rate their latest rental out of 5 stars, the algorithm can make recommendations based on other users who rate the same way. This made the experience extremely personalized without ever having to interact with an employee. However, things weren't great from the get-go. The .com crash took a major hit at the adoption rate of Netflix's primary service, DVD by mail. The company wasn't profitable and was about to go bankrupt within a year.
Blockbuster could have bought Netflix for $50 million, but they laughed at us.
John Antioco, Blockbuster CEO, declined, thinking it was a joke. He stated, "The .com hysteria is completely overblown," thinking it was just another gimmick website, banking on the hype of the emerging internet. Throughout the next decade, Netflix positioned their branding and curated their customer relation process, biding their time to develop into what they always intended to be, an internet company. Subscription-based business models were not a groundbreaking concept when Netflix came into its own. What made it the disruptor of its time and the juggernaut it is today was the combination of a subscription and its most innovative web technology, video streaming. Netflix always intended to offer OTT media services, but the bandwidth capacities made this sort of content delivery unviable in 1997. DVD by mail was only an in-between process, as their founders waited for technology to catch up to their ideas. In 2007, with a decade of planning and the knowledge that the infrastructure was finally able to support the content delivery network, Netflix launched its streaming service, permanently changing how we consume media. Brick-and-mortar stores, like Blockbuster, became dinosaurs practically overnight.
In order for a business model to work, they have to be valuable to a consumer. But what do consumers look for when buying these services? Convenience. Convenience gives users more freedom and accessibility over many nuances such as schedules and late fees. To highlight the role that convenience plays in a service's value, let's take a look at Netflix versus Blockbuster. From the 1980s to the 2000s, Blockbuster dominated the movie rental market. People would have to go in-store, pick out a movie, then return it on time, or otherwise pay a late fee. As Netflix began to build themselves up as a direct competitor in the DVD rental market, Blockbuster quickly started losing market share. How did this happen? Well, Netflix simply offered a much more convenient service with an ever-increasing selection of media. They would ship any amount of DVDs to customers at any time for a flat rate per month, without any late fees. As time went on, Blockbuster's market value dwindled and eventually went bankrupt. Netflix's business, on the other hand, was soaring. This case showed that users were motivated by the convenience of Netflix, where they could get access to any movie, show, or documentary at any time without any hassle. As Netflix became an OTT service, convenience was always kept in mind. They designed an intuitive user interface. They are still commercial-free and void of late fees. Their library has grown to be near bottomless, and viewers can access this library on any device: phone, tablet, computer, or smart TV. Remember when corporations were struggling with how easy piracy was? Well, another advantage to OTT models was that they were more convenient than piracy, and legal. Companies changed their business models to subscription services. This allowed for easy distribution to users, letting them download and stream on any platform of their choice, and for companies to recuperate revenue otherwise lost to piracy. The value of subscription-based models is also seen outside of digital media subscriptions. E-commerce, for example, has had a huge impact on the way consumers receive things. Amazon Prime, which is a subscription-based service for ordering goods, provides express shipping where people can receive products within the same day or the next. Customers are still required to pay the predetermined price of the products they wish to consume, but the subscription fee provides extra convenience to regular customers, providing a higher perception of value to subscribers.
All right, I'm sorry, software as a service play. Look, this is the same business model as Kramer Fave's Salesforce.com. Demandware's customers sign up for long-term subscriptions so they can use the company's software over the web, which lets them save big money on server costs because they don't need to store the software on their own networks. It's in the cloud.
Netflix challenges our relationship with time and place when it comes to consuming media. They even put to question the cultural importance of the schedule. Since there are no commercials, there is no need to push for peak or primetime hours. Entire seasons may be published all at once. If a series has timed releases, viewers can just wait until a season is over to binge watch. Since Netflix provides us with instant access to media at any time, viewers no longer need to wait for specific air times. And this is what, as a consequence, caused us to change our perception of content ownership. In the past, it was thought that if you wanted to consume, you had to own. But because of SVODs and other SaaS, it's now all about access. Merriam-Webster defines binge watching as the act to watch many or all episodes of a TV series in rapid succession. It is the practice of engaging in a long-form medium for an extended period of time. In 2013, a study showed that 67% of television consumers aged 13 to 49 admitted to at least occasional binge watching. Binge watchers are the preferred demographic for streaming services because they are highly engaged, use the platform for content discovery and curation, and create highly customized viewing experiences. Binge watching, however, also makes the viewer set new expectations for media, such as instant gratification and endless options. Netflix knows this and actively promotes binge watching among its viewers by releasing seasons in their entirety. In some ways, Netflix is binge watching. It's become their brand. You can even say that the standard way of using Netflix is to binge watch.
Netflix is built on binge watching. Netflix promoted the idea that it differentiated itself from broadcast television because of the ability to binge watch. And what's so interesting about it is that this sort of expression of freedom, of control that viewers got through Netflix and other streaming platforms is to consume as much as possible.
SVODs aren't without their fair share of critics. They argue that streaming services disrupt the phenomenon known as water cooler talk, or cultural unification effects. This is the bond created by shared cultural experiences through mass media. They argue that fan communities aren't growing because viewers are watching on their own time. But others argue that the opposite effect is actually happening. People are more involved in collectively viewing a medium because catching up through binge watching is an option. In fact, young people use their knowledge of favorite shows to fit in with their peers. Sometimes this even dips into FOMO, or fear of missing out. As defined by researchers Pishbilski et al., FOMO is the apprehension that others might be having rewarding experiences from which one is absent. Those who experience FOMO have the desire to continually stay within the loop with what others are doing. These effects are magnified with social media networks. Users want to be a part of what's trending. They feel that this will help them develop social competence, and that this will give them the opportunity to connect with others. The combination of FOMO and social media presents many individuals with general unhappiness and can be a source of negative feelings or emotions. Because they are out of touch with popular content despite all of its publicity, their life decisions feel devalued through the feelings of loneliness or boredom. We as individuals have an innate desire to curate how we present ourselves to others. Because of this, we want to adopt the behaviors of large groups, only because they are a large group. This is called bandwagoning. This effect is then magnified by social media. If a lot of people are watching a particular show, we feel greatly pressured to do so as well. This pressure can then influence our decision to subscribe to exclusive content. However, another consequence has arisen from our growing need to share our media consumption. We've become more involved in interpreting and critically thinking about media.
So services like Netflix have significantly changed how we consume media. But does this mean anything for how media is produced? One notable consequence was that because they have a dedicated viewer base who binge watches frequently without the need to rely on advertisers, Netflix was able to tweak or cast away certain conventions in the television medium. Because HBO was seen as the quality television network, Netflix has decided to follow their lead by producing and pushing quality in their original programming. In this case, what quality means is the freedom to produce edgy, artistically boundary-pushing, complex, serialized narratives. For example, House of Cards doesn't have recaps or redundant exposition because it assumes the audience will be binge-watching. When comparing streaming services and network television side by side, writers expressed that networks require that they write in acts, with limits to length. On the other hand, streaming services allow them to write like a screenplay, without constant breaks in storytelling. They also weren't required to constantly add eye-catching elements to grab the audience's attention in case they change channels. It's not just the content that's changed, but the format too. Another effect binge watching has had on television production is the increase of short-lived shows. Instead of the standard 22 episodes, subscription-based shows often have a bingeable 10 to 13 episodes, allowing viewings in one sitting. In 2018, Netflix released the Bandersnatch Black Mirror episode, a unique viewer experience for allowing the viewer to participate and affect the story. In a pick-your-own-adventure style, choices made by the viewer will change the narrative and the duration of the episode. It can last between 40 and 90 minutes. That brings up another point. It's also not uncommon to see a difference in runtime between episodes in the same season of a same show. For example, in the 4th season of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, the runtime can vary between 22 to 53 minutes. At the end of the day, though, series that are more likely to be binged are more likely to be greenlit. And it isn't just how shows are presented either. It's the kind of stories they tell too. As sales for DVDs declined in the early 2000s, streaming services were seen by studios as a potential replacement. Believing that the former were no different from pay-per-view, studios tried to impose strict financial rules. Streaming services would only take a small cut of the revenues they generated, and theatrical releases would continue to have the lion's share. So deciding to cut out the studios, services like Netflix and Amazon chose to produce content themselves. Unaware that streaming would nearly wipe out the market for DVD sales and rentals, streaming would have a profound effect on the types and genres of films that would see production.
Well, so what happened was the DVD was a huge part of our business, of our revenue stream. And technology has just made that obsolete. And so the movies that we used to make, you could afford to not make all of your money when it played in the theater because you knew you had the DVD coming behind the release. And 6 months later, you'd get a whole nother chunk. It would be like reopening the movie almost. And when that went away, that changed the type of movies that we could make. I did this movie Behind the Candelabra, and I talked to a studio executive who explained it was a $25 million movie. I would have to put that much into print and advertising, right, to market it, what we call P&A. So I'd have to put that in P&A. So now I'm in $50 million. I have to split everything I get with the exhibitor, right, the people who own the movie theaters. So I would have to make $100 million before I got into profit. And the idea of making $100 million on a story about like this love affair between these two people, yeah, I love everyone in the movie, but that's suddenly a massive gamble in a way that it wasn't in the 1990s when they were making all those kind of movies, the kind of movies that I loved and the kind of movies that were my bread and butter.
Having vertically integrated its own production company, Netflix continues to uphold their belief in consumer choice and personalization. They do this by budgeting huge sums to produce niche, hyper-targeted genre movies. As an example, out of the yearly 35 production projects with a budget over $20 million USD, 75% are dedicated towards appealing to hyper-targeted consumers. As Netflix becomes its own in-house production studio, traditional media networks have also gained a foothold on the video streaming market share. So Netflix is wrapped in an arms race where they have to become HBO before HBO becomes them.
Netflix's rise in popularity has changed how we interact and distribute media services. They have demonstrated that without the constraints of brick and mortar, consumers can experience a highly personalized service without having to go to a store for products. A service that's always up to date and maintained. It can be consumed anytime and anywhere. It's no longer about ownership, a relic of physical possession. It's about access. So what does this mean for the future of consumerism? Seeing the success of the model, other companies in unexpected industries are trying to catch the wave. Investors and business leaders love the consistent and predictable revenue of subscriptions. Toyota and Tesla are already requiring subscriptions for select features on cars, both minor and major. Apple is planning to roll out a subscription service just to get a new iPhone. Even your refrigerator might become subscribable. Enthusiasts love the convenience. Critics dislike the lack of control. Either way, it's just getting more prevalent. It might just be that the only way for the average consumer of the future to get anything then is to subscribe now.